Use the mic, I don't think, but I'm singing. My voice carries pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, that should be fine. Maybe get like sort of close to the mic, but not super close. Like.
Everybody hates me.
His daughter, and he wrote the train today. She's going to stay there 5 days. And so maybe
We always take it off.
Nancy, welcome.
she couldn't keep it in her.
Welcome. Good to see you.
So why did you stay for 5 days? And during that time,
What's his name?
Spartacus.
Yes.
Yeah.
You have a chair there. Muffin.
Hi, Norma. I'm sitting to your right, just so you know that.
That's a great story. Oh, that's you right there? I can still see that. Yeah, I think I did. You're stolen from somebody else there. Might actually have to go.
I joked you had 1 minute because it was almost time. You finished before your child was waiting for you.
You look vaguely familiar.
Last night? I didn't
Oh, yeah.
I still got some.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There is a place where the mountain meets the sky. Sparkling snow tumbles down on trees below, where the Blackfeet and the Flathead once called home. Grizzly bear, moose, and beaver live in harmony. Among eagles, swifts the loon, side by side, on the prairies and tundras, in the wetlands and forests. For now, just now, this place is called a glacier. Welcome, welcome everyone. Good to see everybody here on Labor Day. Good. Please greet the people around you right now. We have some new people in our midst, so please say hi.
Norma, good to see you.
Are there any announcements? Right, just, I call your attention to the announcements in the News and Notes Friday, so check those out. And if you are a visitor, please sign the book. If you would like to, Karen has it right here. You can come after the service to sign your name. And if you wish to have our newsletter, just note that on when you sign your name.
Is it Nancy Kramps who does all that stuff?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
yes. Yeah, I think she's in the hospital.
She's home now.
Is she home now? Right. Yeah,
There's a meal train.
She's had a rough several weeks, months actually. Okay, Megan has a little something about Labor Day.
This weekend, we celebrate Labor Day weekend, a time to honor the past, the present workers of America who have kept our country strong. In 1894, President Grover Cleveland signed into law the first Monday in September as a day to recognize their contributions. It was a revolutionist, Eugene V. Debs, who organized a Pullman strike in 1894 that brought the economy to a halt and which influenced President Cleveland to sign Labor Day into law. Debs was an American socialist, a trade unionist, and a political activist who ran for president under the socialist banner 5 times. He helped contribute to workers' strikes, protesting for better wages and better working conditions, and was a strong advocate against child labor. A familiar quote of his is, "I have no country to fight for. My country is the earth, and I am a citizen of the world." It is a time for reflection on the hard-working men and women who have built our nation. Their sweat and tears have paved the way for the progress and prosperity we have today.
Let us light our chalice with these words. They're on your program, I believe. Good. In light of truth and the warmth of love, we seek to sustain and to share. And this time's for joys and concerns. I have one joy. Are we on? Yeah, okay. My first joy is having friends here. Friends that we met 50 years ago at Lake Geneva at the UU camp. And our kids have grown up together. They had a big night last night, so some of them are still in bed. So please greet Noreen and General Geddes from Cincinnati. Are there any joys and concerns?
My joy is that my daughter Brianna is going to be turning 22 on Tuesday.
I have a joy. We're welcoming Eric Garcia back today.
Yay.
Hasn't seen him in a while.
Anybody else?
It's not afraid.
Yeah, right.
It is. Yes, you can tell by the sound.
For our meditation, I have another poem. Stand still, sit still. The trees above and the bushes beside you are not lost. Wherever you are is called here, and you must treat them as powerful strangers. You must ask permission to know and be known. The forest breathes, the trees and bushes breathe. Listen. It answers. I have made this place for you, they say. And if you love it, you may come again. Saying, here I sit, here I stand. No two trees are the same to the raven. No two branches are the same to the wren. If what a tree or branch does is lost on you, then you are surely lost. Sit still, stand still, for the trees and bushes know you are here. They know where you are, and you must let them find you.
This is the version of the song, and I remember that each year was barn for the Unitarian also. Such an adequate.
Thank you, Dennis. In the last month, my family and I have spent 2 weeks at Chautauqua Institution. And if you're not familiar with Chautauqua, I urge you to visit at least for one day, for a week, or for a season. We now spend 2 weeks at Chautauqua. We used to spend a week, but if you're over 90, you get in free. So we go for 2 weeks now. Maybe next year it'll be 3. But if you go to Chautauqua, it'll get your attention because there's a symphony there, plays, choirs, lectures. Above all, we go for the lectures and the symphony, and it's wonderful. We come home to rest because a full week, 2 weeks, is really quite a stimulating thing. So this year, there's 9 weeks in the season, Chautauqua season, and each week there is a theme. And the first week was on literature, and we had lectures on classic literature, popular literature, all kinds of literature, and authors there, and it was very, very interesting. The second week was on national parks, and that was an eye-opener. And so I'm going to share with you today what we heard at Chautauqua about the national parks. And granted, we know a lot of things that are happening in the national parks and to our climate, but when you hear it from people at Chautauqua who talk to us, it gives you a different perspective on what's happening in the national parks. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions, 5 questions actually, and just speak out. What do you think is the role of the national parks? Anybody?
To preserve the treasures of our landscape.
Right, right. Not only landscape, our culture, our history, and it's said that the national parks is America's greatest storyteller. And that's true. That's true. Okay, it's to preserve landscape and wildlife, our history, and our stories. And it includes not only parks, but monuments and battlefields and specific historical sites. And how many do you think we have? How many national sites? I'm not going to say parks.
All together?
Altogether.
Probably 1,000.
200.
200.
500.
500.
47.
47.
59.
59. We have 425 national sites and parks. And this includes monuments and battlegrounds. So, and do you know what the most recent national site has been designated and when? What? Pullman?
It might be something to do with
Indiana
civil
Dunes?
rights, something to do with that?
Emmett Till. Somebody said that.
Emmett Till, exactly. And Emmett Till, how many know the story about Emmett Till? We all do. He was to be 82 years old, July 25th. So it was on July 25th that Biden designated 3 sites, 2 in Mississippi and 1 in Chicago, to Emmett Till. So that's the most recent, just 2 months ago. Okay. Which park was designated the first national park?
Yosemite. Yellowstone?
Yellowstone? Yellowstone, right, right. And Paul worked there when he was 17. That was
Oh.
how many years ago?
It's not horse and wagon.
What?
Horse and wagon.
Horse and wagon days, yeah, right.
But he gets in.
So, okay. And Yellowstone was designated the first national park. However, Sequoia in California was designated as a state park. But it didn't become a national park until after Yellowstone. So Sequoia, and it is the first national park that is designated to save an organism. Do you know what that organism is?
Tree.
Sequoia tree. Right. Right. Okay, and what are some of the 21st century challenges that national parks have?
They're too popular.
What?
They're too popular.
Too popular.
Maintenance.
Maintenance.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Big business.
Big business.
Yeah.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Oil leases.
Oil leases. Right. Invasive plants and animals.
Yeah.
Things that endanger indigenous areas around the parks. Habitat loss. Air and water pollution. Accessibility. Wildfires. Land claims. And flooding. These are momentous and gigantic challenges that the national parks have. We were at Grand Canyon 2016, and the main areas of Grand Canyon was like Disney Park. I mean, it was sad. I mean, it's just overrun by humans. Right. Us.
Yeah.
Right? Invasive species. Right. Right. So, 2016 was the anniversary of the Grand Canyon, and I'm still trying to get my license plate frame on the car, my Grand Canyon anniversary plate. So we had several speakers on the National Park. The first one was Connor Knighton. He's producer of On the Trail, a Sunday series. How many of you have watched his program? We're all in church then, so. And he's won several Emmys for his documentaries. After his engagement broke off from his girlfriend, he pitched the idea to CBS to send him on a year-long venture visiting all the national parks, which he did. At that time, in 2016, there were only 59 national parks. Since then, 3 of them have been added. So we now have 3 more national parks. His documentary is called Leave No Footprints. Does that sound familiar? Right. It's what we hear from activists who say, when we visit national parks, leave no footprints. He started out in Acadia National Park in Maine, where he saw the sunset rising over Cadillac Mountain, which is the tallest mountain on the East Coast. 1,530 feet, which is nothing compared to some of the mountains in the West, which are over 7,000 feet. But he started there watching the sunset come up. On his year-long trip, he discovered much about the national parks and their surrounding lands and its people. He discovered that the national parks are a lab for saving species, and that human effort has been responsible for delisting many of the endangered animals. He spoke of how the people who live around Hawaii's volcanoes have learned the impermanence of day-to-day life, living so close to the lava. And we know what has happened in Maui. While these volcanoes and their lava created the future by laying down land, the Grand Canyon created for him a glimpse of the past by leaving stories within its rocks, caves, and tributaries. Evidence of Earth present crisis when seen in glaciers like the Grinnell Glacier in Montana's Glacier National Park, where the glacier has retracted 700 acres from 1850 down to 220 acres in 1993. The glacier holds 10% of the Earth's surface and 70% of the world's fresh water, and it's melting. Paul and I saw evidence of glacier melt in Alaska 7 years ago, when huge cliffs of ice made gigantic splashes in the water. Our Earth is changing at a rapid pace. Knighton wrapped up his year-long venture watching the sunset from the edge of Point Reyes National Seashore in California. And I understand he started his trip after his engagement broke up, and it seems that some men just like to take a trip after they break up.
Yeah, right.
William Heat Moon Lees, I guess. I read 3 of his books, and he took a river-long, lake-long trip across the country after his divorce. So. Who's to know? Okay. Then the next people we heard was Kevin Fedarko, who's a journalist, and Pete McBride. Fedarko is a journalist and McBride's a photographer, and is also board member of the Grand Canyon Trust. And they embarked on a journey the length of Grand Canyon, which is, by the way the crow flies, it's about 330 miles. But when they hiked it, it was over 700 miles. And they did this in 8 stages. And they were sponsored by the National Geographic, who had the helicopter to come down and pick them up when they needed to, or in an emergency, or during their break. But they both claimed that, in fact, being on stage, they were blaming each other for going on this terrible trip, because it was so difficult, and they had accidents, and had to be picked up by the helicopter several times. But they did it. And they learned a lot. And the reason they did it, because they wanted to call attention to the region's conservation efforts and the region's needs, and to let people know how fragile this ecosystem is. They talked about the commercial development projects, the uranium mines around the Grand Canyon, and the number of claims that are in process to claim more land to get uranium. They said the public doesn't know about all this, and they should. These mines are responsible for exposing nearby indigenous communities, groups to radiation, causing deleterious health effects. Years of protesting by tribal and environmental groups has led the Biden administration to designate a large tract of land near the canyon as a national monument to prevent further encroachment on the land by the mining industry. In fact, they were there in Chautauqua. They were given an invitation to come to Washington for the signing of this bill. And Fedarko said they chose to come to Chautauqua because they could reach thousands of people in their talk. So after their journey, McBride produced Into the Canyon, a full-length documentary for the National Geographic Channel, which was nominated for an Emmy in 2020. His book, Grand Canyon, Between River and Rim, was published in 2018 and won the National Outdoor Book Award. You can't, he quoted Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "You cannot improve upon this land. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it." He used the Antiquities Act to save the Grand Canyon from development. So, these were two of the major speakers at Chautauqua a couple weeks ago. But there were ordinary people who spoke. One was Rue Mapes, who wants to help Black youngsters find a healing connection to nature. She founded the Outdoor Afro organization in 2009 and is its CEO. Her mission is unity and inclusion in nature. It's a way to give young people another way to express their disappointment, their frustration, and their fears. She believes that nature can change one's outlook. Through her organization, which serves approximately 30,000 people annually in 60 cities, Black youngsters have access to fishing, skiing, biking, camping, swimming, and many other outdoor activities. They also have opportunities for leadership roles too. So it's an organization that I had never heard of that I think is doing amazing work for young Black people. Michael Bartholomew was an indigenous Native American and is superintendent of the Mandan Tribal National Park in Newtown, North Dakota. He works with his community in connection with the National Park Service to tell the indigenous perspective. He wants the public to learn about the indigenous story, their understanding of what land means to them, and how it has changed and formed them. Land is not empty, nor is it wild. It is our homeland, and it is sacred to us. He said it is what has formed him. Lastly, there was Savim Kalyanku, a Muslim from Alabama, who spoke to us. She is executive director of Green Muslims. She too referred to the land as sacred space and shared her Islamic perspective on the environment. She has organized educational tours to teach the public about the watershed that is Chesapeake Bay. She said, quote, "Islam teaches that humans are stewards of the earth. With something as direct as that, we cannot just sit back and say, God, take care of it. We still have to play a role as stewards." So the program was very ecumenical, like Chautauqua is very ecumenical in its approach. The last two speakers were two Christian ministers, and they spoke at the end of the week. And they said, "It is our collective responsibility to help preserve and protect the national parks, that the settlers in venturing to the west discover new land and First Nations people, but unfortunately took the view that dominance was the way and scrubbed human interaction from the land." They pose this question to us listeners. Now knowing the true story of the lands and current challenges facing the national parks, doesn't this bring us to the spiritual aspect of repentance, rethinking preservation, reclaiming action, and reconciliation with the people and the land we have harmed? have a collective responsibility and an obligation to band together to work toward leaving a healthy legacy for future generations where brotherhood, sisterhood, and otherhood can continue to make the difference. Now, I ask you all to share your experiences with your national park visits. Anyone? Pat?
In December, like 1975, perhaps, a friend called and said, I have a really cheap outfitter who will go down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. You want to join me? It's in August. And I said, sure, I will. Well, you can look it up. Georgie's Royal River Rats. A woman whose daughter was killed biking down the highway along California with her mom, and she was killed. And so Georgie had a death wish. She swam the Colorado River twice, and then she became an outfitter with old equipment, very little food, and she wanted to go right down the biggest rapids that she could, right down the middle. Other outfitters would go around. We went over a couple times. One young lady broke her arm on the first rapid, had to be rescued by a mule to get out of there. We had for breakfast river water with quinine, I think they put in it, and powdered milk, and then cereal. For lunch, she wouldn't let us get off the rapids, not to go to the bathroom or eat. Didn't have a lunch stop. She passed around 1 tin of sardines, which I don't eat, 1 can of beer, which I don't drink, and we each had a hard-boiled egg. That was our lunch. Other outfitters would have steak and eggs in the morning, and then we'd have a can of baked beans at night. It was just awful. She didn't tell us that you shouldn't sleep under such and such bush because there are scorpions, so people got scorpion bites. It was the cheapest you could ever imagine. And I went back a couple of years later with a friend who knew a ranger, and he had never met anybody who'd been with her, but she was a legend. Georgie's Royal River Rat. She wore a leopard skin bathing suit, was drunk every night, made out with any man who wanted to. That was Georgie.
Thank you, Pat. Well, Megan and I just went on a trip. I don't know how many national parks we hit. We were gone 12 days. I went to lots of national parks as a kid. Don't remember much about them except for the Grand Canyon. It was just the most fantastic experience to see how much we've preserved, but also to see mankind's effect on them. So visit the parks before it's too late. Here it. Let me get the camera.
Thank you. My experience was at Sequoia National Park, and the thing that I remember most about it, this was in 1948 and I was 19, was the smell. The smell was just intoxicating. It was wonderful, and I said to my dad, he and I were the ones that were brave and hiked into the park. I said, Daddy, if we could can this, we could make $1 million.
As a young teenager, I went to the Gettysburg National, I don't know if it's a park, but it's certainly a national site, monument. So powerful, moving, for all of us who've been to those, we know the rangers are fantastic, and knowledgeable, and they just impart so much, and they really make it a great experience. I'm sure it's changed probably for the better since then.
My husband and I went on our first trip after our honeymoon to Acadia National Park. And when we left State College to drive there, it was 90 degrees in State College, and when we got there it was 40 degrees, but of course we'd packed for 90 degrees. So we spent a week being very, very cold. He'd been a Boy Scout, I'd been a Girl Scout. He had a tarp tent, right, just a tarpaulin that you tied between the trees. And I had borrowed my brother's sleeping bag, he had his own. And I said, we have to put the food in the car at night. And he said, no, we don't. And I said, yeah, really, we do. I mean, when I was a Girl Scout and we camped in the Boy Scout camp, the critters would come and get into our food. The boys didn't have food in their tents, so they didn't know this. I had woken up one morning with a squirrel sitting on my chest, eating the can of peanuts my mother had sent me. But anyway, but we went to see, he had his way, and we went to sleep, and in the middle of the night I heard, and I looked up, and there was a raccoon standing on his chest, eating those little triangles of la vache qui rit, the Bonbell cheese. I shook him and I said, Gary, wake up. So he woke up, and we had, among other things, not packed pajamas. So the raccoon then took off and stood 10 feet in front of the tent, and he threw pebbles at it while it peeled and ate all the rest of the cheese. The next day I could persuade him to put the food in the car.
Girl Scouts prevailed.
I got one there.
There are many stories I could tell you about Yellowstone, some good and some not so good. One thing I would like to say is, I don't know how many of you know where Sand Dunes National Park is. Sand Dunes National Park.
The Great Sand Dunes.
I had never heard of it, even though I went to school in Colorado. We went out there because my dad left me a piece of land and we wanted to see it. And on the way up north, we ran into it right in the middle of Colorado. And one of the nice things about it was they had a large building there with exhibits of different things. But we also learned that if you're 65 years old, you can get a pass for all of the parks in the country. You don't have to pay to get in. So anyone who is 65 or older, or is it?
Yeah, I had one that I bought for $10, but I lost it.
Well, we have ours. And one story I will tell you about stupidity. In Yellowstone, I was fortunate to ride with a ranger that was returning back to Pittsburgh because he was a professor there. But he told me a story about a car had stopped because a big black bear was in the way. And one man in one of the cars opened the window and coaxed the bear over to him and took a cattle prod and hit the bear right on the nose. Well, they'll never do that again because the bear raised up and came down with his arm and caved in half the side of the car. And as you can imagine, the man got out of there as fast as he could. But that's the kind of stupidity that people have to respect when they go into the parks. Much of the problems are created by people who feed the animals, which they shouldn't be doing. They go off trails. They put themselves in danger. And just use your head. Put out fires if you have to have one. Don't take any refuse and just throw it away. Find a proper place to place it. And that's it.
Hi, my name is Mike Pivian. And Pat, I think my girlfriend at the time and I were on the river the same time you were in 1975. And I think maybe we waved to you or something like that. Leopard. Anyways, yeah, we had a little bit more to eat than probably you did. But we did have a person on our raft that did break their arm too. Yeah, the outfitter says, please get off the front of the raft because we're going through some rapids, bouncing up and down, and the lady didn't, and she was holding on to a rope that was in, and she bounced up, flipped, did a somersault right over and out into the water. They had to fish her out of the water, but she had broke her arm in the process from holding on to, and they had to helicopter her out. Yeah, so anyways, but and I was going to mention the pass. I didn't realize it's 80 now, because I got it when the senior pass when it was $10, and then you get into all the parks. But as you know, we know that we think about the well-known ones, but Colorado and the Utah area, the eastern Utah area, and the Four Corners area of the United States are just chock full of interesting. Arches Park, Canyonlands, Dinosaur National Park, which is split between both Colorado and Utah. It has two sites, great dinosaur relics there. Mesa Verde is just gorgeous, one of the most beautiful and interesting places you can go. Even Teddy Roosevelt Park, which is North Dakota's version of the Badlands. I mean, Badlands is, I don't know if Badlands is a national park in South Dakota or a state park. It's national, okay, but Teddy Roosevelt is North Dakota's version of the Badlands. Prairie dogs and everything. It's just a wonderful testament. I mean, there's just so many. It's great.
My daughter took us to, my daughter is back at the hotel in bed after going out with her last night, so she didn't make it today. But she took us to Yosemite years ago, and we went for just an overnight to walk some of the trails, and I complained the whole time because we were supposed to walk 1 mile, and we had to do a 4 mile. I didn't like that, but the thing that really happened that was unusual, this is May, we were supposed to stay. They had a snowstorm, and we could not get out. So we had to stay for the weekend, and unable to get out. Couldn't go any more hiking, but it was really fun in May being a snowstorm. So that's my memory of Yosemite. Megan.
Oh, Norma's first. Okay.
All of these renderings from everyone brought back a lot of wonderful memories of Ron and I over our multiple years of marriage and travels and whatever. But when Tony mentioned Gettysburg, we did about 5-6 years ago, numerous Civil War sites, and I still had some of the brochures that I was throwing out, and they're called they're not national parks, but they're national something or other sites, right? And learned a lot of history and had a lot of good memories on that.
Time for one more, Anita?
I think one of the things that I've noticed as I've gone to the multiple national parks, my goal is to hit them all eventually, but my daughter and I used to travel to a lot of them when we were younger, and the program that they have for the kids, the Junior National Rangers program, was an absolutely excellent program that they still do to this day. They'd give the kids a little brochure and have some facts on it and have little activities for them to do and things. And they got a sign off, the ranger signs off to say that the kids have learned about the park. And so it's these parks are not just for adults. They really do some great programs for the kids and show the kids how to care for the parks and how to care for the animals and to not go up to the buffalo and pet the fluffy cow, you know. and so I think that really needs to be a program for the adults too.
Is there anyone else?
Oh, no, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
I know we're running against the clock, so I'll make this quick. How many of you have actually been to Gettysburg before? Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and you know, my idea of national parks was something you'd see like out in California with beautiful mountains and all that. And the first time I went to Gettysburg, I was just blown away because there's nothing there except for the battlefield. You know, it's just flat, and not just Gettysburg Park itself, but the whole area around there. Well, anyway, my dad must have sworn at some point in his life that he was never going to go camping. He was in the Navy, and he always used to talk about how depriving it was. They only had 30-second showers and all this. So he said to me when I was young, I'm never going camping. But in '66, I became a Boy Scout. And my troop liked to go camping. And so I pestered him and pestered him and pestered him. And finally, 1970, we were going to Gettysburg. And I actually got him to agree to go along on the trip. And he actually drove myself and a bunch of my friends out there in our Ford Country sedan, as I remember. And we got there, and they had like a 12-mile hike where you would go around Seal Valley. And I just assumed that my father and all my friends were going to go with me. And you know, my father not only would not go, he took all my friends in the station wagon, and they went around and did the national park tour in the car. So, when your parents tell you something, take them seriously.
And I know my daughter isn't saying anything, but she has done the Grand Canyon, the upper Colorado, as well as the lower Colorado, and with some geologists who took their group behind the scenes in places where no one had been. And these geologists, you know, if you ever go on a trip, go with a geologist. They'll show you things you've never seen before, or will never see before. So, anyone else? Last? Okay.
Go behind. Carol.
If you go to the Dunes National Park in Colorado, I grew up there, go in the spring when the water is coming down in wide streams through the sand, and off in the distance, at least in the past, you can see snow on the mountains. And you have to decide whether you are in the desert or the mountains or where you are, because it's all there.
Thank you all. I just recently, we were at the Grand Canyon in 2016, and now there is a skywalk that the Navajo tribe has pushed the government to build. And one person has already fatally been killed falling off of the skywalk. It's all glass. There's an average of 12 people who they claim have hurt themselves or died in the Grand Canyon because people aren't careful. I urge you to visit the national parks, but be aware of what we are doing to the land. And we're going to have our offertory now, and I didn't ask the board, but I'm going to ask them if they will use what we offered today towards the National Park Foundation. I think they'll say yes. So we will have the offertory now.
was chasing you as a plane.
Thank you for your generosity. We'll see that it goes to a good place. I don't have closing words, but we will close with singing America the Beautiful, and Ron will lead.
The original song was just called Pike's Peak, and for the reason that the words were written as Catherine Bates in 1882 was on Pike's Peak, or at the top of Pike's Peak, looking out over the nation. And so picture the nation as she would have seen it in the words that we're going to be singing at this point. I don't think I'll use a mic because I think my voice will carry, I think. Okay. America, the beautiful, oh beautiful for thee.
Wait, that's the wrong
Beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea.
That's the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale version.
That's right.
Carol Jody has something to say.
I was born at the foot of Pikes Peak. We
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Sing it again.
Skies for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Is that
Thank you, everybody.
Challenge.
We have coffee. Yes.
Yep. Coffee.
I'm also helping put together a couple of bookshelves for Reverend Beth, if anybody's willing to help me. And I also need help getting them into our office. So it's in the big room.
Are they religious books or just books? Oh, bookshelves.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty cool.